This is my partner and I stringing up the elk hide, and we are gonna let it dry because we were doing a dry scrape hide with this. Um, and both sides will be scraped. So once it's stringed up, next I started scraping the skin side first with a hide scraper. It has to be a razor sharp tool, and this allows, taking off that layer allows the tanning solution to come through and soak into the hide. This is a very methodical process. This one you have to scrape every single surface area of the hide, but it does allow the hide to eventually soak up all that good stuff to make it soft. And so since you can do nice, long, even strokes, not putting too much pressure to puncture through the hide. Sharpening the hide scraping tool is a huge part of dry scraping a hide. I had to do this probably about once every 15 minutes or so. Just the scraper would not hold up against the hide very well, but it's a good practice. So after the grain side is scraped, I started scraping the membrane side, and that's the flesh side. And this is a very light scrape. I didn't need to go super deep with it. And there's still little pieces of gunk on there, but not too bad. This is me when I'm sanding the hide, allowing it to kind of speed on the process. So once it's all finished, I end up starting to make the tanning solution that's ready to soak in there. So I'm using eggs for this hide. This is called an egg tan. There's brain tan, there's a lot of different tans, but this is using eggs because it's readily available. This solution, the hide's gonna stay in there, and so it's gonna soak in there, and it's gonna allow the hide to get soft, and it's gonna be able to penetrate into the hide so that it can kind of loosen up some of those fibers so we can move around and get a nice soft product at the end of it all. Nice piece of leather. I'm separating the yolks here because it does kind of help to have just yolks, but if you don't absolutely need to. And yes. And next I mix up the eggs with some warm water. The warm water really allows the eggs to soak through the hide quite well, and yeah, it allows for penetration. Plus, I'm gonna have to, because the hide is dry, I need to rehydrate it in this solution as well, and that's gonna allow it to penetrate even further. I'm gonna let it soak in that solution for overnight. That's ideally what you do. So this is the hide when it's in the solution. You have to use a giant, 32-gallon trash can, kind of get it in there. And for this process, I'm just getting it in there. It took a long time for the hide to actually rehydrate, but here I kind of start using my hands, kind of stretch out the hide inside the water, and kind of get it down in there a little more. This allows the hide to soak it in a little more. Oh, this hide at this stage for me was very, very not stretching very well, but eventually it did start stretching pretty well. So after I let it sit overnight, it's got to be weighed down with the rocks, and you got to let it sit for about 12 hours. And after that, I pull it out of the solution, and this is called the wringing step. Wringing out the hide allows the hide to soak up the egg solution a second time, and it allows it to penetrate deeper into the fibers. So the more you pull it out and wring it out, the more it kind of gets in there. With this, I just flip it over with this cross beam and just roll it up to the center, and I'm trying to get it as tight as possible here, because it will allow more, squeeze out as much water. Here I'm doing the other side, so I'm just going to basically bring those two sides together. And okay, so once the sides are together, I'm going to take, this is a nice piece of rattan. If I had a longer stick, it would work better, but I'm going to start wringing out the hide, spinning it like that, really squeezing out all the water. That allows, and allows all the water to come out. This is a very physically strenuous part of the process, but it's good. And this side, I had to flip around the other side, so I scooped, wringing out both sides, and then once it's wrung out both sides through that section, I will take out the stick and then kind of rotate it on the crossbeam, and that will allow me to access another area that I can squeeze more water out of. And I'll just repeat the same process until the whole hide is done. Alright, and next I put it right back into the solution and do the same similar thing, stretch it out again. This is all part of the softening process. I'm just getting it in there and kind of try and get it a little softer there. And I'm going to do this once again after some time has passed. With that second soaking, I'm going to wring it all out over again and do the exact same process. Here you can really see the water coming out really clearly. That's what you want. You want all of the moisture out so it can re-soak up all of that really great tanning solution and get deeper in there. So once it's wrung out a second time, what I ended up doing was I had to sew any holes, and there was about 5 holes in this hide. Here I forgot to use the needles correctly. I was pushing on the back and it broke a couple needles, but later remembered that I have to use a push on the sides, but I had to use pliers. This thin was extremely thick. The elk skin is extremely thick, so it was very hard. And I'm sewing with artificial sinew for these holes. Alright, next, I'm basically, I didn't want to put it right back into the solution, so I didn't want to put stress in the holes for softening, which is the stretching part, so I basically put it in the trash bag and put it in the fridge for overnight, and that kept it. So this stage is the softening process. This is the most exciting and also physically strenuous and very stressful stage of the hide tanning process. This hide in particular is super thick and didn't want to stretch out. I put it on the frame. You can do this by hand, which I'll try next time, but it was recommended to do it on the frame because the elk is so huge, it's a large skin, it's hard to kind of keep track of where you soften and not, and it took me a long time to get it on the frame, so I'm basically trying to keep it all. It's basically the hide dried out a little too much, and it got a little too stiff on me too quickly, and the weather was quite warm, which you need because even the elk hide in warm weather it takes about 6 to 8 hours is what I've read, and I softened this hide for about that. As you can see, I have a nice wooden, I made that of an old axe handle, or actually a new axe handle, but it's beveled, and so you can just really lay into it your whole body weight. But even doing that, it was very resistant and stiffening up really quickly. This process, all I'm trying to do is basically move all of the hide fibers around while it's drying. So also people will sometimes call this stretching. So I'm just stretching out the hide so that it's completely keeps it all around. That's what keeps it soft. This is what allows you to actually get a soft hide, because you just take it out of the solution and let it dry, it's going to turn like cardboard. So this method, this is a really necessary and crucial process, and it's again very exciting, physically strenuous, I started feeling very kind of stressed at a certain point because it wasn't going well, and as you can see, I'm really kind of struggling to try and put as much tension and get that height stretched out as much as I can, but it just was not really budging. Um, I've done this before, and it's a very with deer hides, and this is very much harder. Um, so usually you can kind of get a nice stretch going with that, pushing the hand on, but it wasn't really, and so it was very a lot of work. But um, and you also have to work all around the edges, work on the up there is the neck area, the bottom left and right areas are the round pins, so you really got to work the edges first. Those will dry quicker. So it's really just about keeping up with the weather and the how quickly your hide is drying and just paying attention to that. This was a time lapse I did. At this point, I had moved the hide to a more sunny area to try to get it, move it back and forth between shade and sun. Unfortunately, I ended up breaking the frame of the hide, and that caused a big problem for me. So I had to hide off the frame and hand soften it, and do my best to hand soften it anyway. So that was softening process. It didn't really work out as planned, but this is what I'm showing. This what I'm doing right now is the smoking process, which is a way to kind of mitigate whatever softening failures I had there. This process is going to allow me to smoke the hide, which needs to happen anyway, and also kind of save whatever work I've already done on it. It's called the process called pre-smoking. I've never done this before, so I was wanting to give it a try. But here I'm sewing on what's called a skirt, which is basically old denim, whatever clothes you put, sew it at the bottom of the hide so that your hide isn't right up on the poles. And this is all preparation for the smoking process, which is a crucial process for hide tanning. The smoke really sets the fibers of the hide and preserves whatever softening you've done. If you don't smoke the hide, you get it wet at all, it will turn, and you don't soften it out again, it will turn very hard and it will be very not soft. Um, so with this, I basically, I'm just sewing through. I also, the other thing that I didn't have a chance to film was I glued together the hide, folded the hide in half and glued it together. This allowed me to really get the smoke to stay in the hide, and we call this a smoke stack. But it allows to get a really nice, good seal on that. Is really important. So I spent a fair amount of time doing that. And this whole sewing process took at least 3 hours. Just this process alone, but yeah, this process smoking basically, you'll see the footage, but there's basically a fire underneath this hide is gonna be hung up, and it's gonna be the skirt is gonna be on top of this bed of coals, and there's gonna be a bunch of rotted wood, punky wood that I harvested, that's what they call it, and that produces a lot of smoke. It will light on fire once in a while, but it doesn't really. So it just produces a lot of smoke, which is what I want, and gives it a nice, beautiful color. And the punky wood that I chose was cottonwood and oak. Hardwoods are generally preferred, and the cottonwood worked very beautifully. I've used maple in the past, and that didn't work out very well. I needed so much of it because it was softer wood. Um, I also had to harvest really long poles. This is where I harvested all my punky wood and the poles for the tripods. This is a dry riverbed, we call it a wash, in northern LA County, Santa Cruz area, and very beautiful area. This is some of the punky wood. It's very just rotted, soft, just burns really easily. So here I am building the tripod. My brother was kind enough to let me use his house to do this process. It was very cool to show my niece and nephew these skills. So here I'm building the tripod. I'm just lashing it up. Here you kind of get an idea of what how long the poles are, and that's the fire pit that I was working at. I got some firewood. This is what it looks like when it's all set up. It's basically a little mini or large tripod. I ended up flashing a support beam as well, as you'll see. Here I'm building the fire, and the fire doesn't need to be super large. It just needs to be enough to just get it going, because once you add on the punky wood, it turns into coals. This was really, this day was very, very, very tough in some ways, but also very fun because I had to do stuff with my niece and nephew. So here I really start kind of working on it. Once the fire was lit, I had to got a nice bed of coals going, throw in some punky wood, and here I am just kind of lashing up, adjusting the height of the hide, because the hide is really, it was a little too close to the fire, so I had to bring it up a little more, and kind of bring it up and down a bit to adjust it. But basically the jean skirt is what's on top, what stays on top. This process did not, because the fire pit was a bit irregular with the bricks and stuff, but they were necessary, but I wasn't able to get as tight of a seal, and it created a lot of air pockets, which wasn't good because it made it more dangerous for lighting the skirt on fire, which it definitely almost did quite a few times. And this process is just a lot of checking it, constant attention. I needed to pay constant attention to this. If I dozed off for a second, the thing could start lighting on fire. So here I'm just feeling, to really stick your hand in there a lot, kind of feel where the hot spots are, and I felt any sort of hot spot on top of the punky wood coal bed, then I would put more punky wood there, because that would prevent any of the heat from rising in the area to start a fire and burn down my hide. I started getting okay smoke here, and I was able to get some better smoke later. This is when I was first starting, but yeah, it was just a lot of checking. I had that big old bag there, and these pieces of wood were larger, so they created more smoke, but it was harder to keep the fires down, to keep the hot spots. So it was more stressful, but it did smoke faster. This one's probably smoked the fastest of any hide I've ever done. Here I'm getting really good smoke. It was getting about smoke like this for maybe a half hour or so, and that really got me some nice color there, and allowed it to really set the hide. So that was getting really nice smoke there. And yeah, there again, just constantly checking the bottom there, making sure that there's no fires. It's not getting too hot. And breathing was obviously difficult. I was wearing the mask, obviously, with COVID, but it was definitely. So here's what that side looks like. So that here I'm flipping. I needed to flip the hide around. Glue broke, so I had to I had to flip it around and I had to actually re-glue it. But I got some nice color on this side. I was pretty happy at this point. I was like, okay, this is working out pretty well. Even this process took a long time. I was finally able, after getting it glued and dry a little bit, I was able to get it back on there. And this smokestack was not as good. I had to really, I was losing a lot of smoke. I was getting good smoke, and not even as good as last time, but I was losing a lot because the smoking stack was not as super tight. So this one took a little longer, and I was tired, so it was a little bit more difficult. I had to clean out the pit at a certain point. But yeah, so this one was going for a while. This one took about a couple hours, and at one point, at the bottom of the bag, there was a whole bunch of powdery stuff that I put on there. And that was way more effective for keeping down the hot spots, but it also reduced the amount of smoke. So I'd eventually take some out, and it was definitely a process. And I was trying to break them up. That's something I learned for next time, is to break up the pumpkin wood into more consolidated pieces so I wouldn't run into so much issue. So this is the exciting part, because once I finished smoking the other side, I got some color. I made yet another egg tan solution and put all that in there. And this is where I'm gonna let it sit and really do the same thing, work it again, get it rehydrated in there. But when it's fresh off the smoker, it really allows it to set more, is what I've read. So I'm experimenting here. So I'm gonna see how this process works. But yeah, got a lot more eggs, mix them with the warm water, and I was very, very exhausted at the end of this day. Um, so overall, this experience was awesome, but I still need to have more to do, so I will continue this video once it's done.